Hi, welcome to Parenting the Adlerian Way. I'm your host, Adlerian family counselor and parenting expert Alyson Schafer. Each week, I answer your burning parenting questions to help reduce the stress of parenting one tip at a time. We'll explore Adlerian psychology together and learn methods of child guidance for raising a happy, confident, capable, resilient child. Hi, it's Alyson. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm excited to bring you another guest expert today. I have done my research, but this is actually my first time also meeting with anticipation, Leslie Forde. So let me give you a little bit of background before we dig into our topic today. Leslie is the CEO and founder of Mom's Hierarchy of Needs. Got it. Right? How can you not love her already? She has used research to inform growth and innovation strategies for over 20 years. She's held brand management, product marketing, and business development roles in consumer technology, market research, media and publishing companies. And for the past decade, she's been focusing on children's education, mental health, childcare, and elder care. Most recently, she's held leadership positions at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, Care.com, C-Space, which is an Omnicore marketing research agency, and she began her brand management career at Bausch & Lomb and Xerox. So interestingly, she's had over 2,500 parents participate in her ongoing national research study on the pandemic's impact on their lives and careers. She's a frequent speaker, researcher, and consultant to organizations such as HubSpot and 3M on how to support parents in the workplace. Her writing about parenting, motherhood, and equity has appeared in the Washington Post, Slate, Parents Magazine, and her website, Mom's Hierarchy of Needs, among other publications. She's been quoted in New York Times, CNN, National Geographic, Fast Company, U.S. News and World Report, and several others. So when I tell you that I bring the experts, people, I bring the experts, and Leslie is one of them. So welcome to the podcast, Leslie.
Thank you. I am excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
So let's start with, how is it that a brand manager, marketing person decides that you're going to champion the idea of motherhood and equity? What is your sort of legacy story around how that all worked for you?
Well, it's funny. I was considering some advisory work for a startup, and the founder, who's a dad, had developed a technology to help manage stress. It was a wearable for stress. And he had asked for some go-to-market strategy support. So when we met, I talked a little bit about the moms market and how it could be a good entry point. And he said, well, why are moms so stressed? And of course, I laughed and I said, well, how much time do you have? And mind you, he's a dad of three. But I said, there's a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then there's mom's hierarchy of needs. It just rolled out. And as soon as I said it, I just felt this, like I felt it in my body. And I drew it on a little piece of paper. And later that night, I was just kind of consumed with the idea of it. Like, what would it look like for other moms? Would it look like this? I turned it into a PowerPoint. And the idea just kept coming to me. It's like, what would be on other mom's hierarchy of needs? So 150 moms later, because I'm a researcher by training, I learned and slightly edited it from my original version to look like what it is now. Because for me, that was my light bulb moment when I realized that I was trying to do the impossible. Everything that we would do for our mental, physical, and emotional health up at the top, like interest, learning, self-care, which, by the way, in my triangle, that means like sleep and stress management and nutrition, not manicures and spa days, healthy relationships with other adults, including a partner if you're partnered. Like all of those things are way up at the top, but the bottom 2/3, the types of things we really prioritize and hold dear, like our children's milestones and well-being and health, education, the household responsibilities we have, and then our professional role, they're never done. So before kids, like many of us, I was kind of conditioned to believe that there'd be time left over when everything was done at the end of the day. And that's when you would, read that book or go for that run or pursue that PhD, whatever the thing is for you, you kind of condition yourself to take care of everything else first that you prioritize. But when the priority list includes things like never done things, it's an entirely different way of thinking about your time. So suddenly I realized I had to get ruthless about everything in the top third and become incredibly judicious about setting boundaries and not only streamlining what I was doing in the bottom 2/3 where I could, but just thinking about it all differently. Because for many of us, we kind of race through our days. I mean, you're almost like a swimmer, right? You're trying to like shave a few seconds off your time every day. We're moving so fast. We're trying to get everything done. And everything being done isn't possible.
So I love all that. I want to make sure I don't forget to say this one little point, because a lot of people listening to my podcast come from my psychological training, where I'm trained in Adlerian psychology. So for those Adlerians that are listening, Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Abraham Maslow is a student of Alfred Adler. So we are absolutely talking about the same, like we are in the same wheelhouse here. And as you described that, I identified so much with the shaving off the time and the recognition that the tasks that are never not done, we cannot rely on completeness of one thing to carve out the time for those top thirds. I think that's just so brilliant. But you've also talked about this, not just one woman's way of looking at the needs and changes that we need to make around boundaries for ourselves. But there's also people that would argue, yeah, but you know what, culture's against me. Like, you specifically, talk about the difference between being a Black mother and the challenges that differentiate that struggle from somebody else's hierarchy of needs, where we have it's a different storyline. We are not in the same narrative, and you want to bring that to the forefront.
Absolutely. Well, context is everything. And, women in general are kind of dealt this somewhat, I think, difficult conundrum, right? We are given all of these invisible rules about how we're supposed to go through life, how we're supposed to look, how we're supposed to communicate what we need, what's important to us. And by the way, do so in the most polite, pleasing way ever, without offending anyone. And then, after we kind of, maximize our understanding of these rules and evolve into motherhood, then suddenly you have this impossible set of competing goals, right? You have to manage this experience for your children. You are still trying to manage this experience for yourself. If you're choosing to stay in the paid workforce, the nature of many modern professions is that they expect always on availability, right? Which becomes somewhat impossible when you have care for children, not even to mention the care for yourself, partnership, care for your home, all of those things start to compete. So we have those challenges, I think, as women. And then if you further go into the differences for a Black mom, a brown mom, a mom in the BIPOC community, even a mom who's differently abled, right? Suddenly you have even less of you have less of a cohort, right? So you have smaller numbers, and in many cases, less positional power. So moms that are facing systemic biases or systemic racism, you can't negotiate for your boundaries in the same way as someone who doesn't face those challenges. So I'm sensitive to that, as a Black woman. My family's from Barbados. I kind of grew up in both countries. So I also come from an immigrant background, and the cultural context to how you navigate life and how you decide what's important to you and how you communicate that importance to others really matters. So I think a lot of women start to feel this incredible guilt, like they're doing something wrong, like what they're feeling is wrong. And even though they know at the most visceral level that they've been handed a bad deal, they don't want to allow themselves to fully just experience that, mourn the loss of the life that they kind of thought they were going to have once they became mothers, and then begin to figure out, well, from this place that I'm at as a woman or as a woman of color, as a mother, as a partner, as a worker, how can I take what I have and optimize my circumstances and make my life more aligned to who I really am as a person, to what's important to me, and do so with a certain amount of fidelity and integrity.
So during the pandemic, we heard a lot about how inequities were exposed, in I think, a good way. I mean, it's always good to be aware because change always starts with awareness, but in a way that also made me grieve about how still deeply flawed we are in the way that we manage social equality in our country. And so you did research during this time. What did you learn, and where do we go next in terms of making the world better?
So it's a great question. I've now have just over 3,000 parents who've participated in the pandemic study since March 30th of 2020. And every 3 months or 4 months, I slightly update a few of the questions. So we're now in wave 8 of this study. And as you describe, we have this interesting dynamic. I think probably one of the biggest ahas early on in the study is just within the first 6 months of the pandemic, everyone's priorities changed. If you are facing life or death and you are facing something so challenging and dramatic like the pandemic, and figuring out how to keep your family safe, how to keep food on the table, right? How to navigate the grocery store, right? All of these really challenging visceral experiences that we had, it changes you. So suddenly, I think people really wanted to get closer to their ideals, living a life that has purpose, spending their time in ways that matter in their personal lives and in their professional lives. I've seen moms really saddened by the social inequality that exists, really saddened by, especially moms of color, deeply disturbed and saddened by the persistence of racism, deeply saddened and concerned by the persistence of sexism. But what I think is really empowering and exciting is that even moms who are not moms of color, to your point about awareness, suddenly there's this beautiful allyship that's coming from a lot of the news and, deeply disturbing events that I think brought the really highlighted how deep these social issues are. And a lot of women realize that, it's intersectional. A lot of the challenges that we face as women who've been kind of handed a different set of rules in society are being even more deeply felt by women who also are women of color and navigating that. So I think the positives are women are feeling unwilling to pretend anymore that things are fine. Women are feeling unwilling to be complicit in systems that don't work for them, and even systems that don't work for others, even if they have different backgrounds, different race. I'm seeing that in a really powerful way through the study.
So for you, the study is an optimistic report on that we're at a moment of inflection where people are getting empowered. Am I surmising that correctly?
Well, I wish I'm going to caveat it, sort of. I mean, there's different dimensions to the study as it relates to macro issues like racism, sexism, loss of reproductive choice here in the United States. It is galvanizing mothers, at least the mothers who participate in the study, to deeply care about these issues and put some personal stake in terms of their time, their voice, their influence into being part of systems change in a way that I think is epic, right, and historic. But at the same time, mothers are not doing well mentally, emotionally, and physically. Self-care in the study is worse now in the most current wave of the study than it was in the spring of 2020. 86% of the mothers in my current wave say that they are doing terribly or not as well as usual at self-care. So we've had this really prolonged period of self-neglect that is now manifesting in a lack of resilience, a lack of energy, deep depression, deep anxiety, burnout, right? All of the things that we're reading about and seeing, for mothers, I'm seeing that worsening in the study, despite some of the positives on the macro. I think maybe I should describe it as like a commitment to social change and a commitment to being involved in macro issues. At a micro level, I would say mothers are not doing well.
So I find it so interesting, and I'm curious to see your perspective on this. We have been, how long have we been saying self-care is not selfish? That when the oxygen masks come down from the plane, you put yours on first before the child. And, a mother can't provide to her family unless she herself is resourced. And I feel like these are just like we've heard it so many times. We can scream it at the top of our lungs, but clearly there is this gap between the knowing and the advice and the research that we put before them and the doing, the internalizing. So what in your best guess or research makes us understand what that hurdle is so we can start eroding it? Because it's there. We have been giving this advice for a very long time, and mothers are not taking it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we're shamed for spending too much time at the top of the mom's hierarchy of needs. And we are praised for spending time in the bottom 2/3. There is a accepted societal norm of self-sacrifice for mothers. We have seen our own mothers in many cases do it, and we've seen our own grandmothers in many cases do it. Where look at any holiday gathering, family gathering, and what are the mothers doing? They're spinning themselves in circles, making everybody happy, giving everybody what they need, making sure things are clean. The gendered norm persists in a lot of cultures and in a lot of families. I mean, are the dads doing that? At least in my family, no. And in most families, no. But it's an expectation that we've so deeply internalized because that's what we were raised to do. That's what we are taught the mom job is. And breaking from that is difficult, right? You don't see people on your Instagram feed telling you that they took a nap, telling you that they relaxed, right? You see them working hard or spending time with the kids or involved in a business trip or in a fundraiser. They're kind of actively doing and giving and serving, but we are not given the permission in society or rewarded for really fueling our own well-being. And that's what I want to change. That's what motivates me to do this work. This is what took me from being somebody who was just really curious about this and researching it to solve my own problem of burning out when my second child was born and I returned to work and crashed. It took it from this idea and curiosity to me investing in this full time because the problem isn't going away. I've seen women writing about these same dynamics from the 50s, from the 60s. I mean, to your point, we've been getting this advice forever, but until mothers think about our time differently and realize that there is a mom's hierarchy of needs, that anything that you might do in the top third, there's going to be a mountain of things competing for that space. I was explaining I think this was just about a couple of weeks ago, to someone that, you could throw Pelotons at mothers right now. It's not about willpower, and it's not always even about access. The minute she sits on it, 10 people are going to want something from her. She's going to get a phone call. Someone's going to be looking for something and they can't find it. Someone's going to throw up on her, right? By the time she does all the things that she has to do to just manage that and triage what's coming at her, she'll have like 5 minutes left. And then she'll think, you know what? I'd rather just let me clean the counters, right? She won't even bother. So it's like you have to be defensive about your time, in addition to being offensive about your time as a mother. And I think that's what's unique. And that's what allows me now, with this lens on my life and with all the research behind me, to engage differently and to empower other mothers to engage differently.
So that offense and defense is about chalking that boundary and really feeling okay about taking it.
Absolutely. And, getting somewhat ruthless about your boundaries, because the people in your life, as much as they love you, they are not inside your head. They do not know what it feels like to be you. And most of the work that you're doing is invisible to them. And we are, awash in invisible work in our homes and often in the workplace. And that is eroding. Women are at greater risk for so many, not only mental health challenges, we're at greater risk for a lot of physical health challenges because of this burden. By the time you reach like age 44, 86% of women are mothers. So the overwhelming majority of women in our society are navigating care of children, in many cases, care of aging parents or other loved ones. And care of ourselves gets squeezed out. That ends up becoming last on the list.
And the fact that, listening to a podcast with Michelle Obama, who said, I will be the first lady on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but on Tuesday, whatever. She let the White House know. You want to talk about somebody who chalked a boundary. She was like, no, I am here. I'm a mother first, and you can have my professional duties in that capacity on these days and work with it. Wow. Now, that's great to be at that level. It might be different if you're like, you've worked your way up to be senior management at a company and you're so worried that you've worked so hard to get to that level of recognition and professionalism that you're frightened that if you say, I'm going to my kid's soccer game, and they might think, oh, well, this other person doesn't have kids, or this, husband is going to delegate it to his wife or whatever. So why are we accommodating your competing demands? And we cower. And so I loved what you said about power in numbers, like that we need to have an allyship that says we're asking for something that's absolutely reasonable if we would all do it together.
Exactly that. And I'd say in the workplace, I'll just add that even though we are getting these messages, or women in corporate America are getting these messages like, hey, use that standing desk, go for that walk, take your PTO time, do your self-care. At the same time, they're being, chastised if they have to leave a meeting early to go pick up a child, or, silently outed for not having their little green light on at all hours of the day and night to show that they're available for a chat. And if an email comes out from your boss at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and you're the one with the childcare responsibilities, and other people on the team do not have those responsibilities, they're going to pick up that plum assignment before you are. They're going to be recognized as being on top of things in a way that you're not. And it's deeply unfair. It's a problem with how work works and has worked traditionally, which on the workplace side of my organization, that is my other hat, right? I'm in organizations trying to change policies, benefits, and practices so that mothers, fathers, and all caregivers can do really fantastic work, but also have healthy, productive lives that include care.
So I want to dig in a little bit into that exact topic now, because I too have been hired during the pandemic by the HR branch of companies to say, we see that our employees are struggling, that they see that the burden of homeschooling and carrying on work and everything was disproportionately placed on their mom employees, and they wanted to support them. These HR people say, we don't want to leave our staff. Like, we have invested largely. Turnover is expensive. We don't want to bring new people on board. We want to care for them. We want to make sure that we're being supportive, within this budget. But the will is there. The will is there. I see it. But I don't necessarily know if they are listening well enough to know it's not enough just to bring in a speaker for 1 hour to say, see, we looked after your self-care. We had a lady that says you should get a manicure, or you should, turn off your notices, whatever. Like, it's so deeper than that if we're talking about systemic change. And I personally find it interesting to see how we do this in different cultures, because other countries have different cultures and different corporate cultures, and there are places doing it way better than we are, and we know that from them that we too could do it better if we made it important. So what have you come to discover would truly be an improvement that we could advocate for, or raise our voices to support, that really makes a difference? Not don't get me wrong, not that I don't want people to hire me for HR gigs. I don't want to shoot myself in the foot there, but it's a big problem to solve.
I would say, I don't think this problem is going to go away quickly. I think we have lots of work to do for the foreseeable future. Well, it's interesting. In the study, just looking at the data and the early 6 months, maybe even the first year of the study, it kind of bubbled up into 4 categories. So when I go into a workplace, I will, implore them to focus on these 4 categories. 1, flexibility. And by flexibility, that doesn't mean remote. Sure. Yes, people want that. And certainly women people want that more than non-women people. There's so many studies, and including a recent one that came out, that show that women are more likely to want to work from home than men are. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And people of color are more likely to want to work from home than non-people of color. But flexibility to me is a full spectrum. It means flexible expectations. In our research study, people at one point in the study wanted flexible expectations. This is when we were still in lockdown mode, more than they wanted a raise. So being told that you have a certain goal or a certain key performance indicator that you have to meet that was set maybe, the year prior, when the conditions were completely different, and perhaps you now have half the staff, or your costs have, doubled because of all of the, labor shortages and supply chain issues, but you're still being asked to deliver the same thing in the same time frame. That's squeezing people. That is, squeezing the air out of people to try to meet unreasonable expectations. Flexible scheduling, being inclusive about meeting times. Please don't ask people to start their day at, 8 or 9 a.m. Why? If they have childcare responsibilities, that's harmful. If they have elder care responsibilities, that's also harmful. Avoid early mornings, late afternoons. I also tell employers, in addition to flexibility and being very broad about how they think of it, to include childcare, either subsidized, curated, ideally destigmatized as part of what they offer, childcare and elder care, mental health care, ideally paid for, subsidized, destigmatized, and modeling that mental health care is really a critical part of how they think about caring for their people. I tell leaders, if you're having a bad day, tell your people you're having a bad day. Let people know that they can have a bad day. If you're taking time off because you need a mental health day, tell your team that. So they will in turn do that. If you're going to take a run during the middle of the day, tell your team that. So they will in turn do that. And then the last one is psychological safety, and really like embodying an environment where people can make mistakes, where people can share their ideas without, worry that they're going to be diminished if the idea isn't perfect. The ability to manage bullies and microaggressions in the workplace, which are particularly challenging for women, but also even more so for women of color. Those are the types of aggressions that hollow people out, make them feel dehumanized, and over time, deeply affect their mental health. So those are like the 4 pillars that I talk about on the employer side. And I give a lot of detail on how to model that in actual practice.
My experience has been that, yes, it's a mammoth change, but at the same time, there's a lot of times where people don't, as a party of one, my life, my kids, my home, my employer, my corporate culture, whatever it is. And I find that they really need an invitation to say, have you asked? Have you tried? Have you, don't be defeated before you go out into the battlefield. I worked with a mom who really was in a conundrum about, childcare and drop off. And she had a husband who had disabilities that, they had a ADHD kid, and this kid would bolt in the parking garage, and she couldn't go to work until she helped get the kid in the car, and because of all whatever. And I said, could you work remotely this is before the pandemic, but do you think that you could work from home for the first hour, or could you start your start time? And she was like, oh no, I couldn't possibly. And I said, have you asked? And she's like, no. And of course, I just said, well, better to ask and have them deny than to just assume. And when she asked, they were like, yeah, absolutely, if that's helpful. So, sometimes there is the power of one, where we do have these assumptions that, yeah, there's a lot to be done. And I get there's whatever legislation and budgets and corporate culture and things that feel really overwhelming when we think of the whole thing. But there's also things that we can actually have some agency and try to do. And I think now time is really ripe, because I think for me, one of the silver linings of the many to the pandemic was we zoomed into everybody's homes, and we suddenly realized we have to look at our corporate world holistically. They do have kids. They do have seniors. They have dogs jumping on their laps. They have kids demanding this. This is the CEO of the company, and you're like, oh, he's not the guy in the suit. He's the guy in the sweatshirt that's got the cranky 2-year-old. It was so humanizing. And I hope we never lose that holistic view that behind every forward-facing employee, there is their family. And we have to recognize that pillar of their life as being what they bring to work. And we want to support all of it,
Exactly. No, I'm so with you on that. Well, it's interesting too. This is where power difference comes into play in some cases. And also this is where somebody who is part of a historically overlooked or marginalized group is going to have a different experience than someone who's not in many cases. But I will tell you, my study, 3% of the mothers, since I've been asking the question, can you ask your manager for what you really need? 3% say yes. So, and 97, yes, and 97%. Oh,
I'm shedding a tear. That's
I know.
3%.
3%,
not
97.
A quarter, not a half, 3%.
3%. So it's heartbreaking, but the psychological safety isn't there in most organizations. Now, again, this depends on what type of role she is in, what type of industry she is in, what type of work culture she is in. But I will say, on a positive note, if you are in a role where it really doesn't matter where you work, and many people are, especially now, then navigating remote versus hybrid, most organizations are allowing for that. But if you have a special circumstance, I interviewed a woman last year, Alexis Hasselberger. She's a productivity expert. She said, present an idea as an experiment, because no one wants to say no to an experiment. So you can suggest, hey, let's try this for a couple of months and then revisit it if it's not working well, if you want a certain accommodation made. And then what I tell people as well in terms of safety in numbers, there's a rise in employee resource groups in a lot of larger companies. So if that psychological safety isn't there with your boss or with your team, then ask the parents in the parent resource group, or ask the other women in the women's resource group, or ask the other professionals of color in the professionals of color group. Hey, have you dealt with this situation? How might I best advocate for myself? What other practices are in place here? So there are some options to ask, even if you can't ask directly, to your point.
And more organizations are starting those alignment groups, the Deloitte dads, specifically for just for dads, briefcase parents, another one, they are trying to create some format for conversation and connection, so that maybe more of these experiments can happen. And we forget how far we've come too. Remember when we thought if you wore jeans on Friday, you wouldn't be as productive? Or if you brought your dog to work, you'd get nothing done. Like, these ideas aren't that long ago. They really aren't that long ago. And we realize people want to contribute. People want to work. If you give them extra time, they use it usually in productive ways. They don't squander their time. They usually become workaholics. This flexibility. If I let you work whenever you wanted to work and I didn't make you accountable, you'd probably just go off and do nothing. And it's like, no, they'd probably break the boundary the other way and overproduce for you. And we'd be here saying your psychological well-being says you should shut it down at 8:00 or whatever.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I tell people on the workplace side, I'm like, everyone wants to be excellent at everything. Like, people don't feel good if they're not doing great work. People also don't feel good if they're not the mothers that they want to be, if they're not the partner that they want to be, if they're not the child to aging parents that they imagine they'd be. So all of those like identity, questions, like, am I meeting my own bar for this identity, including work, I think deeply affects people.
What have you taken as tangible takeaways from your learning and your research? And you're a mom, like, you're working, you're out there in a very big way, spreading the word about all this. So, tell me about your day. Give me some of your, this is what it looks like at Leslie's house. How do you have the lived, felt experience of everything that you're saying?
Absolutely. Well, probably the most critical for me has been setting like non-negotiable self-care time. And that is how I usually start my day.
What's it look like? What do you do?
Yeah. So I go running. Now these days I'm going running after I get the kids ready for school, have them eat their breakfast, get them dressed, get them out the door. So after I leave the school, I will go for a run. And I'm usually out for like 3.5 miles. So that is my morning reset. And since the pandemic, I've become an all-weather runner, because for all that time that my gym was closed, I became someone who runs all the time in all the weather. And it's actually a beautiful thing. I did not think I'd like it, but once I got the right clothes for it, running in the rain or running in the snow, like I love starting my day outside. So being in nature, moving in nature, and having protected space that is largely quiet is really huge for me. Now, my children are school age now. Back when they were babies and toddlers, it was a little bit different, right? Like I still would run in the mornings, but sometimes like I'd be like trying to sneak out the door at 6 o'clock and someone woke up and I would just put either my son or my daughter in the running stroller and give them a snack pack and put the rain cover on and off we'd go. That wasn't the same mind clearing, me time sort of run, but I got the movement in. So if I had to kind of think about that time, it's like movement is really critical. Time alone is really critical, but I'm willing to trade that off if I have to in order to get the movement in. And having a little space to just clear my head and reset, just from a pure mental health standpoint, is really critical. So if I end up having to bring a kid on the run, or I would take a run behind my kids on their scooters, which has happened, countless times, then I would try to sit, and I still try to do this midday, and do a very quick, like 5-minute meditation. In the mornings, before I even get out of bed, I try to spend 15 minutes just doing a quiet meditation in bed, so that I'm kind of approaching the day with a little bit more resilience and a little bit more energy. Mindfulness has been very big for me, staying in the moment as much as possible, particularly when my kids are, if they're talking over each other, or they're talking over me, or there's a lot of energy, or they're arguing with each other. Instead of like starting to tell myself some sort of story that I should have trained them better, or I'm doing it wrong, or my mother is a better mother than I am, all those things that we tell ourselves out of guilt, I shut that voice down and just get into the moment and really pay attention to what's happening and what they're saying. So that has been incredible for me. I try, it's not always easy, but I try, even if it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, to take a brief walk sometime during the day when I'm starting to feel like tired. If I'm reading the same paragraph over and over again, or if I'm finding myself on LinkedIn for too long, looking at comments, but not wanting to engage with them, that's my sign that I'm tired and I just need to get up and walk around. I am very big on nutrition and eating like food that fuels my body. So, and cooking is something I love to do. So I cook almost every day. But I batch cook now so that I can make meals in a pretty, short space of time. But that's something that's kind of a hobby and also a self-care thing.
You and I could get along very well.
Thank you. I know. I'm like, you're up in Canada,
very
right?
Many of the same, and again, it's easy to say, if you love running, you get it, right? Like to somebody who doesn't run, it's hard to say, you want me to run in the snow and you call that self-care? That sounds like one horrific thing to add on to my pile of terrible things that are going on in my life, but if you push through, because I'm much the same. And I don't know if this resonates with you, but I remember when my kids were little. Well, first of all, I would say to parents, you can't compare how I do my life when my kids are teenagers to your kids that are toddlers, because I can leave the house in the morning, and if they wake up without me, I'm out for my run and they're getting themselves off to school because they're not little people who need me. I wasn't doing these same. My day-to-day life was very different when my kids were 2, 3, and 4 than when they were 16, 17, 18, for Pete's sakes. So don't look at what I'm doing as the expert who has it all figured out. I'm in a different stage of my life. So, that's unfair. I did things very differently when I had little dependents that needed me, for sure. I still did self-care, but just differently.
Absolutely. Well, and that's why I gave that example, the stroller, because even though thankfully, I think last year gave the stroller away. But it's, it is different, but you have to have a plan like B, C, and probably even a plan D for anything that's important to you. And it could be movement, right? It could be like walking or running or swimming or whatever the thing is for you. Or if it's just that you really need time alone and you just need time to think and you just don't want to hear anything, whatever that like really critical thing is, have a backup plan for coverage, because whatever time of day you plan on, something's going to happen during that time of day to compete for it. And you're not going to be able to do it in the same way. So just know that and always have an alternative. So it's like, and for me, it was, if I can't go running in the morning, especially when the kids are really little, then I'm going to go running at lunchtime, and I bring all my stuff into work when I worked in a physical place, and I would shower at work if I had that. Or, if it's not going to happen because I'm on a business trip during morning or afternoon, then I'm going to do it like in this little window before the dinner meetings, right? So I would always plan a backup. And I think that's critical for any mom to know, that protecting your thing, whatever your thing is that makes you feel whole and fuels you up, it's never going to happen at the perfect time of day or in the way that you anticipate. So give yourself like a plan B and C.
Yeah. I know for me, it was a sort of a philosophical decision, which I guess goes to the hierarchy concept that you're talking about, living my values. And so I would start my days by saying, I come first. So I would wake up in the morning and I was always the first person awake. And so this is my time and I am looking after me. And so that was whatever it was, reading my favorite book or meditating, running, it doesn't matter, but it was me time. And then I would turn myself over to my family because they were my second value. So that was making breakfasts and lunches and getting kids up and hearing about their night and whatever, and connecting with my family before we went in disparate ways off to school and work and whatever, doing our learning and contribution back to society. So when everyone would leave the door at 9 o'clock, I'd say, okay, now I've done my time. I've done my time with my family. Now I give myself to the greater world. And when the end of the day came, I would say, this is as much as I could give to the greater world and the good of others. And now I'm going to reconnect with my family. And we would do our family time or whatever. And, if I had maybe some extra time, I might check back on emails and stuff. And anything I couldn't get done, I had to kind of fight the FOMO of well, look at her business is so much bigger and she did this TV show and she did this. I'm going but then I would have to give up one of these other slices. So I was just really cognizant of if I can't get it done in the time that I'm willing to give for my give back to the world, then I guess it doesn't get done. And maybe I could be more efficient. Maybe I could be more whatever. But I was just really clear that I got my time, and I find time at night. Again, this is my formula, and I don't believe anyone should impose a formula on anybody else just to put these ideas out there for people to create their own internal structures. But I actually find, just ask yourself this, moms, time at night, I felt that. Why am I giving myself the crappiest slice of the pie? I'm exhausted. I'm tired. Likely all I'm going to do is watch crappy television. I can't even read a chapter of a book without falling asleep. I want to give myself the best slice of pie, which is when I get up in the morning and I'm refreshed. So I started getting up at 7 and 7 became 6 and 6 became 5 because I loved my mornings so much. And I gave up being a night owl when I was a student, always studying late, pulling all-nighters for being, in university, and realizing I don't like nights. Actually, I'm not a night owl. I'm a morning bird, and I am going to claim that time for myself. And I've stuck with that formula, but it's mine. I don't mean to impose it on others, but noodle that around.
Absolutely. Well, I have set up an ideal schedule for myself as well, work-wise. And it's not always possible, but ideally, I protect mornings during the work part of my day for my creative tasks. I'm a writer, right, and a researcher, and they both take up a lot of brain space. They're very greedy. So I try to allocate that block where I have at least a couple hours that's uninterrupted doing deep work for something that is cognitively challenging, right? Something that I love to do, but I want to kind of be interrupted while I do it. And then I will try to check emails and social media in shorter blocks, right after that, and then have another block of deep work time before I head into meetings and conversations. So typically that's how I structure my day. And I try to stack all my meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays so that Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I have more writing time, and they are more deep work periods, because I'm doing writing for the site, but I'm also doing writing for clients, and I'm also writing, so it just takes up a lot of time. Knowing that morning is my more clear, productive time is kind of what allowed me to structure the day that way. And like you, the later evenings, I'm kind of mentally I'm kind of tired. I do some work after my kids go to sleep, but I try to cut that off by 9. By 9:30. And then that last bit might be checking email, checking social media, doing a little bit of journaling if I'm in the mood to do a little bit of journaling to kind of just get my mind clear before the next day. And I stopped watching television. I miss it. There are times where I'll binge watch something for a few weeks at a time and then stop again for several months. But that allowed me to get more time that I could use as a business owner. As you well know, it takes up a lot of time. So those are just some little tricks in terms of how I've structured my schedule to make it fairly consistent and to use those blocks where I have the most energy as productively as I can.
And I'm just, going to summarize what I hear is the theme there, though, is please, mothers, know that someone will always want your time. Somebody will always want your opinion, your dollar, your duct cleaning, your PTA cookie, whatever. Somebody to host Thanksgiving dinner. There is always going to be people chewing at your bones. And what I'm hearing you say is that's fine. That's a reality of life. But if you consciously decide that you have a goal of how you want to live your life and how you want to prioritize your mother's hierarchy of needs, and you set down those boundaries and say, I'm not available on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays. I do my creative work in the morning. I take my kids to gym at this. If you can own it and protect it and learn the skill of saying no and to honor yourself enough to put to live the values that you hold in your head into the way that you walk the talk by being able to protect that time, then you've got a life of meaning where you get it all done on your own terms.
Exactly. And I'll add to that, you get what's important done, right? It'll never be that you get it all, but what is all to you, right? And I loved the way you described your structure. And if you are kind of theming it, like, okay, certain amount of time for self-care or self-reflection, whether it's movement, sleep, healthy adult relationships, stress management, whatever those things are, like you have that time. You have the time with your kids, right? A time to really bond with them. I mean, I realized for the longest time, I felt like I was just, and I still feel this way sometimes on the weekends. It's like I'm spinning around, cleaning up after them, making meals for them, taking them to and from the playground. But a lot of the time that I really wanted to have was time to really listen to them and play with them and engage with them and not just be the logistical brain, right? Holding everything together. So now I'm much more intentional, although things are kind of a mess here, right? But I'm more intentional about.
No, she's a human. Leslie's a human. It's been outed.
It's true. Oh yeah. You would not want to say it's not neat and tidy here anymore. That's one of the things I had to trade off.
Gave that up. Yeah.
Yeah. I could have a really clean and tidy house, which I love, or I can have more quality time doing things that really matter to me and having the relationship I want to have with the kids. So I shifted in that direction. But all of that, once it's your things, then everything else that you have to do feels better if some of that time was spent on your well-being and your priorities. And you don't need to put other people's priorities onto your plate. And you don't have to put other people's priorities for you anywhere on your calendar if you don't want to. And saying no and getting really comfortable with the reaction that others have, which will not always be favorable, is important, I think, to protecting your own mental health, frankly.
Oh my gosh. I think that we've done a good service in our conversation and empowering mother listeners to want to really embed this into their lives, that giving permission. Oh my gosh. I want you to have the final word here. Is there anything that you wish that we had talked about or things that came up? Because we went in many different directions and maybe you pinned something and we didn't close it off. I would just want to give you the final word.
Absolutely. Well, I would encourage every listener, every mom to start to become really ruthless about managing her well-being time and think about how much time she's spending on her well-being instead of how much time she's spending on her shoulds and on her to-do list and on her corporate work, because we're oriented to do that. And that's how I think we break, frankly. And that's how I broke. And it took me 2.5 years to recover from burnout. So please, please, please do not let that be you. I would encourage you. I do have an app that does that, Time Check, on my site, and it is available and free. So please use it. It takes a minute a week. Just check how you're spending your well-being time at the top of the mom's hierarchy of needs. And you will start to change if you are spending more time in service to yourself. I would encourage you to give yourself the gift of support. Look for those places, those people, those resources that can take things off your plate. That is also, I think, a critical need right now. I have a subscription for moms, if you are so inclined. It is a well-being subscription where we send self-care packages on a quarterly basis. And in between, there's time with me for live events. There's like audio books. I pick some of the best, like podcasts, books, TED Talks, like little short bursts that you can listen to that really fuel your resolve around resetting and caring for yourself. And we have a lot of fun in a private community for moms. So please join us if you are so inclined to get a little extra self-care support.
So we will put all of the links to the Mom's Hierarchy of Needs and the app. And we'll put all of that and where to follow you on social media. Go to the show notes. We'll make sure that everyone's plugged in. And please, please, please jump over and join Leslie's community. I'm going to. My kids are flown and grown. I'm at that phase of life. But you never stop having the need to be inspired, to be balanced, to know your values, to walk the talk, so that we make it in the long run, not the long game, not the short game, right? It's nice to do it with like-minded people. And I feel like I made a new friend today, Leslie. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. I knew it would be.
As you know, it takes a village to make a podcast, so thanks to my team, including Max Cotter, my editor and technician, as well as the crew at H2O Digital. This podcast was recorded in Toronto, Canada. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit.